Hello, CCS community. Welcome to our Parent Enrichment seminar known as the Digital Tsunami. We call it the Digital Tsunami because we feel like really as our society, we've been hit by a huge tidal wave of electronics, beginning in at least the last 2 or 3 generations. Randy Down, our principal back at Secondary Christian Growth Week, presented the Digital Tsunami to our secondary students, challenging them on a multiple level of fronts about what electronics were doing to them and to them spiritually, relationally, and really even educationally. So that's we want to concentrate today about how cell phones, the internet, and other electronics take away from your students in many different ways. So we're going to be talking about some facts about what has been found as researchers have dove into what's happening. We're also going to be looking at, obviously as a school, we want to look at this educationally, number one. Number two, we want to look at this, how this is affecting our kids relationally. And again, as a Christian school, we want to look at this spiritually. So let me go ahead and just jump right in and talk a little bit about what has been found about the consumption of electronics in our society. Now, interesting facts, sobering facts, I would say, is that we touch our phones 150 times a day. The scary part of that is some of you may be saying, oh, I definitely touch it more than that. We upload 1.8 pictures a day. And how many of us, as we think about this, could live without our phone? How many of us could just put it down, walk away from it all day, and not have a level of anxiety? Did you know that texting now is the #1 cause of teen-aged deaths? So no longer drinking and driving, it's now texting. The average person actually aged 16 to 24 texts 127 times a day. High school girls text 4,300 times in 1 month. And boys, although they lag behind, text 2,600 times a month. Just think about how much time that takes out of their week. Now, from the magazine Time Health, studies have suggested that young people who spend more than 2 hours a day on social networking sites are more likely to report psychological distress. What does that mean? Well, this is seeing friends constantly on holiday, enjoying nights out, having fun, where they're not. The report, Status of Mind, states these feelings can promote a compare and despair attitude. Social media posts can also set unrealistic expectations and create feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. This may explain why Instagram, where personal photos take the center stage, this received the worst scores for body image and anxiety. Many of you know of what's happening in our society with teenage suicide. It's in amazing proportions that you'll not hear reported on the usual news, but if you look it up, you'll see that we do not need to be adding despair and anxiety to our kids' lives. Other things that happen in our society, obviously cyberbullying is a big part of it. Hiding behind that phone screen to hurt someone else. People ages, I found this very interesting, between the ages of 12 and 18. 12 and 18 are 40% more willing to post an offensive message on social media than, say, an adult. 16% of students are bullied due to race, so 16% due to race, 35% due to body type, and 47% based upon appearance. Anonymous apps like Yik Yak and After School are harming millions of teenagers without recourse. No one seems to like you for who you actually are. I want to bring our Dean of Students, Eric Axum, up to talk a little bit about the impact that cell phones and screens have had on our school, particularly in the area of discipline. Eric, come on up.
Thanks, Ron. When we think about the internet and the world of social media, these two aspects should never be underestimated in the lives of our children. More than just a phone, a smartphone gives a child or a young adult access to potent and potentially infectious ideas that can lead to long-lasting consequences and heartache. And being a student at CCS is no vaccine or guarantee that such painful consequences will not occur. This year alone, we have had 2 students withdraw from attending our school, 1 student expelled, and 2 students re-enroll after having been expelled by CCS, all for reasons related to the use of their cell phone. That fact should cause us to pause. Further, some of the toughest issues of bullying and mean girl mentality have been fueled by the easy access that kids have to social media and their cell phones. A wise and loving parent is one who is going to be both aware and alert to the dangers that a smartphone poses. They will regularly hold their child accountable for the fact that they have this kind of device, checking in on their texts, looking at their internet history, and having open-ended conversations about their use and what's going on in the world of their cell phone and the internet. How they use this tool and being a wise and loving parent and helping them use this tool can be a blessing or it can lead to potential harm. Proverbs 12:15 states, "The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel." It would be our encouragement from my heart to yours that you would take the time to be that wise and loving parent who keeps an eye and an ear open to what's going on in the lives of your kids as they have their smartphones and explore the internet.
Now, obviously, as an educational institution, we want to talk about what we think, how smartphones and the social media and the internet is impacting your student. According to Common Sense Media's 2015 census, on any given day, the average American teenager consumes just under 9 hours of entertainment media, excluding time spent in school or for homework. And that raises the question, where can learning fit in? Much of what I'm basing this part of my talk on today is from a secular magazine called Education Week. So none of this is particularly spiritual, but it is looking at it from the concern of educators, whether they be Christians or not, and what social media and cell phones are doing to our kids. Now, what's happened as we have had the rise of media multitasking habits in our students. Now, nearly 2/3 of teens who multitask, so this is asking them what they think, so they say they don't think watching television, texting, or using social media while doing homework makes any difference to the quality of their work. Now, parent, that's up to you whether you believe that or not, but I'll tell you, I think the homework would go a lot faster without these distractions. Now, in fact, chronic media multitaskers are worse at the most kinds of thinking not only required of multitasking, but what we generally think of as involving deep thought, okay? So when you're doing schoolwork, it's important to be able to think critically. What am I learning? How does it apply? How can I apply it to my life? Additionally, a recent California State University study said of 263 middle, high school, and university students, they found that the average student studied fewer than 6 minutes before switching tasks, often distracted by technology, including social media or texting. Now, what kind of critical thinking do you think is happening in a 6-minute period? The other day I was talking to my son and I said, oh, you got to study tonight, you have a test coming up. And I said, how long do you need to study? Because we had something else we wanted to do that night. And he says, oh, probably 15, 20 minutes. I don't know about you, but now maybe he can study faster than me, but I usually needed at least a half an hour, 45 minutes, or an hour if I'm preparing for a test. They think they can get a lot more in a lot shorter time, and I think a lot of this comes from this hopping from one thing to another. While many of these studies are also relevant to adults, we have to remember that the brain chemistry of adolescents makes them particularly vulnerable to excessive smartphone use and media consumption. Neurologically, adolescents aren't ready to think about the consequences of their actions. Obviously, Eric just told us about some discipline situations, or plan for their future, or manage their impulses like adults yet. Yet, despite their undeveloped frontal lobes, it is also true that a person's capacity to learn will never be greater than in adolescence. Hence, why we have junior high and high school, why learning is so important at this time in their development. Now, let's think about this. Are we raising a generation of students who are cognitively unprepared to think critically? Are they unprepared to think critically? And what will that do to our society? What will that do to our churches? What can that do to future families? Now, I'm not here to say throw away your cell phone or blow up your TV. Smartphones and media, technology is here to stay. And they've got a whole lifetime ahead to experiment and engage in the virtues of technology. But if adolescence is the ripest time to learn, develop cognitive abilities, and reinforce positive behavior, we must allow them opportunities to grow as critical, free-thinking defenders of, say, even our democracy. It's time we recognize the extent these devices nullify the benefits that wireless technology offers us. I remember when the internet first became available. I remember when we first got, in 1989, I got my first email. And I thought it was great. I thought the communication opportunities were amazing. However, as we have seen the growth of this in our society, and we look at the education of our students, we are at a crucial stage to determine the degree to which wireless mobile technology should influence our lives. Where do we draw the line? Is there a line? However, it is a difficult question. If students can somehow be weaned off their smartphones, what about their tablets? What about their laptops? What about their gaming devices? What about television? So I wanted to talk a little bit today about relationally. Now, relationally, as our second topic, or our third thing we're covering today, Randy Down recently quoted, he says, social media is actually disconnecting us. He says, in 1960, the average person reported they had 11 people they considered their closest friends. In 2017, the number in a Harris poll was 2. We'd all live life better holding someone's hands instead of clicking keys. Now, I don't know about you, I want my kids to be healthy relationally, and in no way am I thinking that my kids are relationally superior, but I do want them to have relational experiences. I want them to grow relationally, and I believe that the best place for a child, a teenager, is for them to get that relational experiences at home and with you. Being social isn't defined by social media. Remember, it involves showing other people you care through eye contact, through conversation, and through empathy. Unfortunately, with the average American child and teenager spending 53 hours a week with media and technology, they have more of a relationship with screens than they do with parents or people. How can a student ever learn to get along with people like this? Now, do you remember your childhood? I don't know. When I grew up in the city of Philadelphia, I lived across from my elementary school, and there was a big schoolyard. I remember going to the schoolyard and playing with friends. Now, some of the kids weren't very nice. Some of them were bullies, but we figured out how to deal with that. Otherwise, we made our own games. We played cops and robbers. We played endless freeze tag, or until we were called in when it was past dark. I remember my dad yelling out the front door of our house that it was time to come in, or he had a piercing whistle. I knew that when I heard that whistle, it was time to go home. Back then, we had to deal with winning and losing, getting kicked by a neighbor, and being empathetic to a friend who got hurt. We learned about the real world by playing with each other. Now, I don't know about you. Again, when I think about my childhood, our screens were large pieces of furniture in our living room that our parents could monitor very well, because usually they were there with us watching TV, or they could at least hear what we were watching. If they heard too many beeps in a television show, or bleeps, believe me, my mom was in there changing that show pretty quickly. Now, our screens are in our pockets and in our backpacks. How can you as a parent keep up? Another thing, young children learn language best when interacting with a real person, and even better when it's their parent. I'm telling you the truth, Sesame Street didn't teach you how to talk. Your parents did. Children always do better if they have clear boundaries. But we seem to have given up boundaries when it comes to electronics because we think they'll be mad at us or they won't like it. Screen time requires time limits and parameters, or it will take over your child's free time. It is our job as a parent to teach our children the difference between appropriate and inappropriate content. Don't leave this task to a teacher, a pastor, or a counselor. Just as much as you wouldn't give your kids candy bars for dinner, screen time junk is bad for your kids' mental diet. Emotions, ladies and gentlemen, have everything to do with relationships. Emotions are responses to what happens in our lives, both pleasant and unpleasant. Our kids need to learn how to process emotions. They learn that by interacting with parents, siblings, and other people real time, face to face, not face to screen. Have you noticed, and my own kids are like this too, have you noticed how impatient kids are these days? They ask you a question, and if you don't have the answer within 0.00022 seconds, how impatient they become, because Google can tell them before you can. Wouldn't you be impatient with a human if they couldn't give you an answer that quickly? Why wait for a human if you can ask Alexa or Siri? Now, lastly, and briefly, I just want to talk about spiritually. What have we become accustomed to? What have we become dependent on? And what does it do to our souls? What does the constant barrage of the trivial, the urgent, the mediocre, the traumatic, the heartbreaking, the buffoonery do to us when it comes in an unending stream, unfiltered, unexplained, unproven, unexpected, and most of it unworthy? Yet we pay attention on demand? Now, the brother of Jesus was trying to offer some very simple guidelines of a true life with God when, among other things, he said in James 1:27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and fruitless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. How do we look after orphans and widows with our screens? The idea of forming a spiritual life is to create space in your day for God. To intentionally put yourself in a space that allows you to draw upon and experiencing the healing power of God filling you, that life of God filling you. Over the ages, serious followers have turned not to their cell phone, but they have used stillness and quiet, worship, fasting, prayer, beautiful places, and a number of other types of exercises to purposely drink deeply of the presence of God. They untangle their souls from the world. Now, no one will care for your soul if you don't. Now, I want to give you some practical ideas. We've given you a lot of data. We've kind of raised the alarm. We've waved the red flag. I want to tell you what I'm doing. I'm turning off my phone around 8 p.m. each night. I'm choosing not to turn it back on first thing in the morning. I'm going to reserve that time for prayer and for connecting with my Heavenly Father before I check email or see what's going on Fox News or getting whatever texts I missed overnight. I'm putting it on silent mode during dinner, and I'm ignoring the buzz if it does vibrate. I challenge you, go on a date and leave your phones at home. Make the phone wait until you are ready. In these small ways, you can make your phone a tool again, as Eric mentioned earlier, something that serves you instead of the other way around. That's for you. Now for your student. For your kids, take responsibility for the phones and electronics in your house. God has bestowed upon you a great responsibility to honor to raise your kids. Don't come down hard on them. That will get nowhere. Tell them you have messed up and you're sorry. You haven't engaged with their electronics and you want to. You've let them down in this area, but now you want to engage with them in this area. And maybe even ask them if they would forgive you for when you haven't been there to help. Begin a conversation. Talk to them about it. Talk to them about your desires to help them be relational adults one day that can think critically and measure the world by God's standards taught to them by caring adults. This has been a lot to cover today. This is one of the first Parent Enrichment seminars we've done this year. And we believe in this so much, this is what we wanted to deliver to you first. So we hope that this has been of use to you and that it will help you be a parent that thinks about what's happening in the world of electronics. Now, if you're interested, there's 2 different books that I recommend. The first one is Growing Up Social, Raising Relational Kids in a Screen-Driven World. Now, it's by Arlene Pellicane and Gary Chapman. Gary Chapman, you might know, did the 5 Love Languages. The second book is called The Tech-Wise Family, Everyday Steps for Putting Technology in its Proper Place, written by Andy Crouch. Those are 2 books you can check out, and I don't think they're really easy reads, and they can give you practical ideas for helping your kids and yourself for that matter, because you have to lead by example. We care about you and your families. We're glad you're our partner. That's who we are. We are Covenant Christian School. Thank you.